So being a minority and celebrating holidays that are not mainstream, we don't get the day off, which is something that we've been trying to fight the district board with. You often have to miss school and then you have to worry about all the work you're missing. So I think that's a bit harder to do as as a minority group of like, how can we celebrate when like school systems and work systems kind of work against you a little bit?
Welcome to Respect, Relate, Connect, the official podcast for Living Room Conversations, a nonprofit organization focused on building understanding and bringing people together through guided conversations since 2010. Well, hi. Welcome to this month's episode of the Respect, Relate, Connect podcast, the official podcast for Living Room Conversations. I'm Stuart Fletcher. I'm going to be your host tonight, and I have three guests here with me who will be able to introduce themselves in just a minute here. We will be discussing today our Holidays and Traditions Guide. I love being able to go through these conversations and host this podcast because I get to hear from a lot of different perspectives about things that can seem really commonplace, things that are just kind of part of our everyday life. Sometimes we take them for granted the more common they are. And so I like to learn about new things and I like to appreciate what I already have. And so that way everything becomes more meaningful. The guide we're talking about today, Holidays and Traditions, was created last year and it can be found on our website at livingroomconversations.org. What is great about livingroomconversations.org is we have all of our resources, both guides, and we have collections of questions, and we have different resource booklets. All of these things are free to use, and they can all be scaled to your needs. Our guides can be tailored for panelists and assembly halls, for faith groups and libraries, for classrooms and community centers, and even just for families and friends. Everything we make is designed to put people first, experiences first, empathy first, and then issues and facts and positions second. So as we go through today, we're going to be talking not about a political thing, but something that can be sensitive for lots of people. So I just encourage you all to make sure that we put empathy and understanding first. So now we are going to introduce ourselves. Here's how we're going to do it. So we are going to say our name, and we will say where we live and what we hope to get out of this conversation. And then by the end, we'll go back to that last question and see if our expectations kind of met our experience. So I'll go first, and then Andre, and then Irshad, and then we'll finish with Anishka at the end. And that's kind of the order we're going to stay in for the most part. All right. So like I said, my name is Stuart Fletcher. I live in Provo, Utah. I go to Brigham Young University. And what I hope to get out of this conversation is just a broader understanding of what the holidays mean to more people. Specifically, holidays that maybe I'm not familiar with. I grew up Christian, and so there are lots of holidays, oddly enough, at the end of the year, but also just throughout the whole year, that I have very little knowledge about and very little connection to. And so I'm excited to learn more about that.
Cool. I guess that's my cue. My name is Andre Winkfield. I live in San Antonio, Texas right now. And for me, I had a pretty, I would say, American traditional holiday traditions growing up. So I'm hoping to expand my perspective a little bit, learn a little bit more about you all, and just get hopefully be able to be more authentic going forward and just know a little bit more about some folks who are different than myself. So looking forward to it.
Hi, my name is Irshad Molla. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I'm excited and I'm looking forward to find common ground. I feel like no matter what we celebrate, there's always some parallel. There's always some common ground we all share. So I'm excited to see what those are.
Hi, I'm Anishka Durvasula, and I live in Irvine, California. So I'm excited to kind of hear about everyone's different family traditions and the holidays that we each kind of celebrate, and also kind of mirroring what Irshad was saying, finding some of the similarities that are kind of there for everyone, even though the holidays and traditions might be different.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. Quick question before we proceed to the next part. Irshad, is Ohio in the Eastern time zone or is it Central?
Eastern.
Okay, finally. I've been hosting this podcast for almost a year now, and I've been waiting to get a podcast where we have somebody in each time zone. I think we did it.
Perfect.
If you're in Eastern and then Andre's in Central and then I'm in Mountain and Anishka's in Pacific, I mean, finally. This is what I've been building towards this whole year. Well, we are going to continue down past the introduction and we're going to talk about our conversation agreements. These conversation agreements are our 6 guidelines for productive conversations. And it's really what sets living room conversations apart from just any other kind of structured dialogue, is that we are going to read these 6 points and each one represents a common pain point in conversations just across the board and a way to fix it. So I'll read the first one, and if you guys are willing, we'll just go back in that order and we'll each read a bullet point. So the first is be curious and listen to understand.
Show respect and suspend judgment.
Note any common ground as well as any differences.
Be authentic and welcome that from others.
Be purposeful and to the point.
Own and guide the conversation.
Perfect. And I'm going to invite each of you to think about those agreements as we go through this conversation. And at any point, if you feel like someone's violating one of these 6 agreements, we can stop, we can reevaluate, and then we can move forward. So we'll move down to round 1, which is another introductory round of getting to know each other slightly better. They found that when you actually have a personal connection with somebody, it's easier for you to accept new information and it's easier for you to put them first over any kind of difference that you might have. So these questions are designed to help us ease into getting to know each other before we go to the bulk of the conversation. So in round 1, there are 3 questions, and we'll each get 1 to 2 minutes to answer one of those 3, whichever one you want to choose. Here are the 3 questions. What are your hopes and concerns for your family, community, and or the country? What would your best friend say about who you are? What sense of purpose, mission, or duty guides you in your life? The one that really drew me in was what sense of purpose, mission, or duty guides you in your life? It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently. I'm not even really sure why. Sometimes you just do some kind of self-evaluations. You need to figure out like what your values are, where you stand, who you really are, and if what you do reflects who you are. And a sense of purpose or mission or duty that really guides me is making sure that everything I say or do comes from a place of authenticity, that I am being 100% genuine in my interactions with people, in my interactions with myself, with my self-talk, with the actions I choose to do in public, in private. What doesn't matter, as long as I am being 100% authentic and integrous to who I am, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. Because even if I am like maybe off the path or I'm not being as productive as I want to be, if I'm being authentic, I can recognize it. But if I'm being inauthentic, there's no way to even recognize the problem, so I can't fix it.
Oh, that's awesome, Stuart. And are we going one after the other, or are we leaving room for like commentary and stuff? Or
so we will just go one after the other right now.
Okay.
And as the rounds progress, it'll open up to a more free-form conversation.
Sure thing. So I'll go. I also really like that question just because, you know, in everything I do, I try to come from a place of value system, whether I'm trying to start a new hobby or whatever. So for me, and I really like that answer as well. But if I were to put a spin on that, I would say that I want to be able to express myself authentically. So not just in, you know, how I speak and how I move and, you know, what I choose to do with my life, but also in anything I create. anything I put out there, anything that I share, I want to make sure that that is something that's coming from me without fear of judgment, and that, people can hopefully get some sense of joy from it. And also just providing as well. I've been, making sure that the folks in my 10 foot, who I see every day, and my girlfriend, my family, and everything are taken care of, for the foreseeable future and beyond. And then my community as well, making sure I'm representing my faith the best I can, being a vessel for God, and, make sure I'm pouring back in my community, doing charity work, things of that nature. So I would say that's what guides me. Definitely always something that can be improved on, but and always something that's changing as well. But that's the best answer I can give at this moment in time. So
Nice. For me, I would say for the first question about hopes and kind of concerns, this kind of goes together, is so I do a lot of my work is on youth voice and youth justice and getting in like politics and civics. And I've noticed a lot of times where you're told so I was at a conference recently, and one individual he said that adults are at 21, so your brain's fully developed at 21. So if you're 23, you're a 2-year-old adult. Therefore, your experiences are invalid. And I was like, okay, interesting take. I was like, I understand where you're coming from, but it's like a full stop. It's just like people are like, okay, now because you're that young, we shouldn't listen to you at all. But for me, it's like, I'm not saying I'm right all the time. I'm just saying we should all listen to each other. I think there's so much wisdom in like a second grader. I learn a lot from little kids. So we're all in this world together. So we should all listen to each other and feel heard. So that's something I hope I'm able to like work together with other people to do. And that's a concern I've seen. And I hope we can all listen to each other more.
I really liked everything you were saying, Irshad, and I feel the same way. I feel like I'll try to answer, I guess, the second question of what would your best friend say about who you are? I think that's a tricky one, but I feel like my friends would say that I'm very kind of logic oriented. So I like to see situations and things objective, and I'm always kind of like giving my advice that it is in a way that's very kind of logic oriented. And I think that I'm also someone who like loves to have fun and sees like the joy in doing a lot of different activities. And I think that there's a lot of different things that kind of fill your cup. And I feel like I try to be someone who's like diverse in that, because I think that if you put something or too much water in one cup and not enough in the others, then it's just going to kind of overflow. So I feel like balance and trying to see things in a very logical light is something that my best friends would say about me.
Perfect. I loved all those answers. I'm always curious what my best friend would actually say about me. You never know, but hopefully all good things. We'll move to round 2, which will be the bulk of our conversation today. And it's a bank of several questions. And just like before, I'm going to read through these questions and we'll each get 2 minutes of our own little time to express exactly how we feel, to answer one of the following questions. But then after that, that's when we're kind of going to open it up. You can respond to other people. You can ask people direct questions. We can have a little bit more free form here. But before we jump to those questions, there's a paragraph right at the top of the page. Can I get one of you guys to volunteer to read that paragraph for us? Right under the picture.
Oh, I see it. Okay, I'll read it. 'Tis the season where people start to put up lights and decorate their homes, where shopping centers sell seasonal adornments and ornaments, and we can smell the aroma of warm spices and baked pies fill up in the air. Holiday traditions are meant to bring people and families together, and what better way than to share what we love most about celebrating the holidays? Holiday traditions are unique from household to household, and every tradition has the space to be celebrated. So let's get together and share just how we celebrate the holidays.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So with that little bit of background in play here, I'm going to read out these questions, and then we're going to go one at a time, and then we're going to open up. So the first question is, what are your early memories of celebrating the holidays? What traditions do you associate with those holidays? What does connecting with family and friends over the holidays look like for you? What do you love about it? What would you change? How has this changed over the years for you? What experiences have you had sharing your traditions with others? When have others shared traditions with you? What was that like? Are there any new traditions you'd like to explore or add to what you already celebrate? What sparks your curiosity about these traditions? When you think about holidays and traditions, what's at the heart of the matter for you? So that's quite a few questions. And so I'm going to go first and we'll go back in that order. But feel free to take a little bit of time to formulate your thoughts. We're not going to try to rush you to have like some perfect answer right away. The question that jumped out to me is the very last one. When you think about holidays and traditions, what's at the heart of the matter for you? I think that is really the central question with any kind of tradition, even whether it's religious or cultural or community, whatever the tradition is, like, why does it exist? What does it actually bring for you? I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we are a very, very family-oriented Christian denomination. There's like, if you knew any stereotypes about us, it's like there's big families, there's lots of kids, and there's like huge dinner tables covered in food, and they're all just like fighting around to try to eat. That was literally like, that's my childhood. I come from a massive family, especially for American standards. I'm the middle of 10 children. And so every holiday was just like, it was like Black Friday to do anything. We just like this horde of kids running around trying to get anything done, where we demolish whole turkeys with like nobody's business. We had to buy candy in bulk if we ever tried to decorate a gingerbread house. And to me, what lies at the heart of all my traditions, whether religious or cultural or whatever, it is my family. It's like, without my family, it feels kind of wrong. I've had Christmases away from home, or I've had birthdays away from home. I've had all these things that you have to celebrate in a different way, and it always feels a little incomplete. To me, the holidays and the traditions around them are designed for an excuse to celebrate your family. And everything else is kind of, it's a bonus. And the family is what really is the central figure of it all.
That's a great answer. And I guess the one, and I would agree with you, just to pick a different question, what I would say is question 2, what does connecting with family and friends over the holidays look like for me? Again, I agree. It's all about the family and your the people in your loved ones, right? And what that looks like for me is, it varies from year to year, right? But especially when we were younger and everyone lived in Maryland together, that's my aunts, my uncles, my cousins coming over, and you have the age groups like separating off and mixing. So the adults are over here, and they're doing karaoke, and like the kids are like there, and they're waiting to take their turn, and they're like, you got your one cousin who is on the Game Boy on Pokemon, and y'all are talking about your Pokemon, whatever, and like the adults are drunk, but you don't really realize it because you're a kid, and you're just like, wow, everyone's so happy. Like, that is what it is to me. So just like, a lot of activity, a lot of energy, a lot of love, right? And then being able to see it from the different perspectives with the different ages as well. And that's what I love about it, really. I never, I would say I was pretty close with all my cousins and even the older folks. My grandma lived with us for a long time, and she would have us there. I remember we were all making a pie from scratch, and that's like it's very classic, right? But I'm very blessed to have had that experience. At my dad's house, it was because I had 2 separate households. So at my dad's house, it was similar for sure. The family is a bit more spread out, so not quite as much. But even then, we would either go to our aunt's house or have, my dad's siblings would come over, or whatever that looks like, right? What I would change about it is just from the perspective of a child, right? Like I said, you don't know everyone's drunk. There's like a lot at play, maybe in the background that I'm not aware of. So for me, I'm just like, I can see my favorite cousins, we're singing karaoke and we're eating all this good food and we're this, and this. And then as I get older and life gets more complex, I learn who doesn't like who, and I learn some bits of the family history. And I'm like, okay. And then, that certain relative gets drinks in them, and now holidays ruined for everyone. So that doesn't happen. That's not really a huge problem in my family, but just I see more of it. I notice more of it, and it definitely it's definitely a blessing to not pick up on that tension sometimes as a child, even though sometimes you do as well. So that's what's changed over the years, just my perspective on it. But overall, it's still something I really enjoy. And I think the part that I did enjoy is still there. I just am playing a different role in it now.
Yeah, I echo a lot about the big family aspect. So the first question on earliest memories. So I grew up in India for not a long time, but when I was really young. So my family, it was my grandma, my grandpa, my mom's aunt. So total, we were like 13 people just in our house. And I grew up in a very small town and village, and literally every single person was family, which was crazy. So after Ramadan, on Eid, so like the celebration of the 30 days of fasting on Eid, so you'd go pray, and then it's tradition to go to each person's house and like wish them Eid Mubarak and whatever. So I went with the family, and I did not realize how many family members I had. So we went down one street, and it was house after house after house, just like 7 houses in a row were just our family members. So just like hi. And so they'd had this one traditional sweet. It's called sheer korma. It's like pudding in a way. So I would have that 7 times in a row. I was sick of that sweet after like the 3rd time, but it was great. I was like, this is great. But yeah, it's amazing. I think just being surrounded with a town full of family and a house full of family and just coming together and seeing that is very profound. And I think holidays really bring that out.
I was also kind of looking up at the first question, kind of similar to Irshad. And I was family, I guess, is a common theme with everyone. And that's definitely the case for me. And I know, so growing up, and especially with Christmas, I am a big stickler for tradition. So we have quite a few, I guess, now, but some things in my family is like from the time both me and my brother were like so young, we've been watching Polar Express and Sound of Music during the holiday season. And so this is a kind of like a must, except with Sound of Music, it's like 3 hours. And especially now that like I'm 18 and my brother is 21, we've seen it way too many times. But I'm kind of like one of those people where it's like we have to absolutely do this. Like it's not Christmas if we don't. And it's the same with like even on Christmas Day, can we have like the same kind of set routine of like, okay, we're gonna have presents in the morning, and then me and my mom, we kind of start doing a lot of the cooking, and then we try to wrangle my brother to help out, even though that's quite unsuccessful half the time. And then we always have like a family walk and the set kind of same menu for dinner. And I feel like it's one of those things where the common thing about why I look forward to Christmas so much is just because of kind of being able to spend time with your family and being able to kind of have that day to celebrate kind of coming together and doing these traditions that are so intertwined with, especially like my childhood. It is what kind of makes it really special. So I feel like that's one of those things which, especially getting older and going to college and having everyone in different places, being able to come back in the holiday time and have that same thing that was very much present in my childhood is what kind of makes it so special.
I definitely feel you on the length of the Sound of Music. That was a family favorite in my family too. But we found this movie called 1776, and we would watch it every 4th of July. And it is a 3-hour long musical where they're all dressed head to toe in colonial outfits. And it's like John Adams singing about the Declaration. And people, like so many people hate it. But like our family were like, no, we have, like, it's not the 4th of July if we don't listen to this super long movie that nobody likes. We have to. It's part of our tradition. And it is an interesting thing because my oldest brother, he really bucked against that a little bit with all of our traditions, in fact. And I want to ask you guys this question because we all kind of talked about family and childhood and how our perceptions were different when we were a kid, and we try to maintain those things when we were a little bit older. So my question would be is like, how do we actually maintain the magic of holidays when nobody's doing it for us now?
Well, I think a lot of that is just about taking initiative because to your point, I sort of saw this slow drop off once even as I was going through college, right? Because you move out and, my sister moved out. She's my older sister. And then I moved out. And then it's like I moved to a different state. And then it's like, all right, parents got an empty nest. My mom moved to a different state. My dad's going on vacation. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it gets more and more difficult. And for me, it's just like a matter of taking initiative. So it's like, all right, we're going to get in this group chat. What are we doing? Who's going where? Right. And with friends as well, like, okay, we all live in a different place. We're going to hit Secret Santa because we're not rich and we can't buy presents for everybody. So it's like, let's do the Secret Santa. So just making sure that even if it has to be you who does it, because it is a priority for my family, but, life happens. And, it's just making sure that it's like, hey, and this year, for example, my sister lives in California. My mom lives in Florida. Dad lives in Maryland. I live in Texas. Not easy, right? So this year I'm going to my dad's house. I'm going to hang out with him. My mom's with my sister. Last year I was with my sister. It's like, we're going to make it happen one way or the other. And it's like, there's multiple holidays, right? There's Thanksgiving, there's Christmas, there's birthdays. If it's a priority, you'll do it. And, I think it's just a little more work this time around. That's all it is. And that includes traditions or, whatever, a successful holiday is to you, and that might have to change a little bit. But, again, we all said it's all about being with the family and spending that time and coming together, like Anishka said. So I feel like as long as that's there, it's like for me, that's a successful holiday.
This question kind of made me think of, so being a minority and celebrating holidays that are not mainstream, we don't get the day off, which is something that we've been trying to fight the district board with, of getting Eid off or getting Diwali off or whichever else. And it's very hard because it's like for me, so for Eid right now, it falls in like April and May, which is around final season. And for kids, it's like tests and stuff. And so you often have to miss school and then you have to worry about all the work you're missing. Or some kids miss the holiday and they go to school because they can't like make it up either way. So I think that's a bit harder to do as like, again, as a minority group, of like, how can we celebrate when like school systems and work systems kind of work against you a little bit. So that's like one concern I kind of had. And then the other one is you're not validated. The other thing I've noticed, so when I was in high school even, and we talk about holidays, and then obviously like I don't celebrate Christmas, and I was like, oh, Ramadan, and I was very excited to talk about it, and no one, it was just like pin drop silence. And the teacher was like, okay, moving on from that, as if like, and so I've noticed that a lot, where even with little kids, just because people don't understand, they move on very quickly, and what you celebrate is a part of your identity, and it's almost like you're invalidating this person's identity in a way. So I feel really bad when I see little kids go through that, where it's like, no, it's so cool what you celebrate. It doesn't matter. So I think even reaching out and just being like, hey, what's a fun tradition that you do? I think that would mean a lot to a kid. So yeah, I think I've noticed those two things coming from like a minority perspective.
No, that's definitely something that I also kind of realized, because I grew up kind of in Cheshire, Connecticut, and there it was a predominantly white community. But one of the things that I appreciated they did is that they would have, for every holiday, one of the parents come in who celebrated that holiday. So for Hanukkah, there was a Jewish family that would come in and they would explain about the tradition, and all the kids would kind of learn about it. And then the same for all of these major different kinds of holidays. And it was something which I really did appreciate, because most people did celebrate the predominant Christian holidays, but it kind of gave exposure, which was nice. And I felt like that's something that I didn't see as much of when I moved to California. Something I was also kind of thinking about was similar to what was kind of spoken about earlier, about kind of just keeping the spirit of why we celebrate these holidays prevalent, even though it's kind of harder. I think when I was younger, I was thinking about like on my Christmas wish list, I never really thought much of it. It was just kind of like, I like this, I want this, kind of like when I was like 7 or whatever. And then I think like getting older, when you kind of understand more about like, oh, money and all that stuff, it's not just this like idea of like, oh, like nothing really matters anymore, because then you're like, oh, I kind of feel bad for asking for this, or like, do I really need this? Stuff like that. And I think that it goes back to like, oh, it's not actually that important. Like the traditions that we do, the things about like, oh, it has to be like this or it has to be like this. It's not important. It's like the main thing is about being with family and making that time special. And I think that especially with the holidays that fall at the end of the year, there's so much to celebrate in what everyone has kind of accomplished for that year. And I think being there for your family members and your friends and putting in that time and to show that you care, that's the most important thing. And I think that as I've gotten older, it's just one of those things where it's not built in and that you have to actually work for.
I like the point that you just ended with there, that it's not built in, that you actually have to go out and put some work into it, learn about other people. I've had a cool experience this last couple, maybe year and a half since I've moved to my new house. One of my upstairs roommates is from Israel. And it's very interesting because he's very open about his holidays and his beliefs. And it's been cool for me to learn kind of firsthand what he does and what it means to him and all these different things from more of a personal perspective. I've read about it in school. You hear about it and I had some, non-practicing Jewish friends all throughout high school. But my housemate, he built like a whole tabernacle in our backyard a couple months ago, and he always has like the menorah in the front window during Hanukkah. It's been really cool to learn like, just because I don't see it all the time doesn't mean it's not really valuable to him and to his whole community. So what do you guys think is really the trick to be able to balance all these kinds of traditions and holidays that may not have any intersection? That's kind of the problem I've seen a lot, is that because it's really religious and it's really personal, it's hard to bridge the gap between one person's religious traditions and another person's religious traditions. What can we do better as a country or as just a community to help bridge the gaps between different people's belief systems?
I think interfaith. So our mosque during Ramadan. So when you break fast, we have an interfaith fast breaking night. So you're told to bring a friend from a different faith or a different background, and you sit and you break the fast together. So like they give you a date, and so you kind of go through the process. So people have loved coming with me and like seeing like, oh, how do you do this? So I think even like small steps like that, where it's like, and I really, even if you have parties like holiday parties, we try to do this when we have Eid, is like bringing friends from other cultures and religions to join in with the food and just kind of see and celebrate. So I think just like tiny steps we can take, or like institutions can take, like with an interfaith approach, I think can be really powerful.
I definitely agree with that. And, I think in general, right, like even at the personal level from, both for the country, which is like, we don't even get the holidays off that we need, right? But to the institutions, and then to at a personal level, opening the doors to have that conversation and accepting that, hey, I don't like, oh, we're all the same. That's not true, right? Accepting that we are different, there are differences, and like, hey, I don't have the tools myself to bridge that gap, doing the work and like, hey, what does Ramadan mean? What does Eid mean? What do these do? What Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, all these different things, what do they mean, right? And then going to someone and say, well, how do you celebrate? And, tell me about what you do different. Let me, go eat with your family, whatever that looks like. I think on a personal level, it's just about giving people room to share in that sense, and then listening.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like curiosity is like a very big component to all of this, and that I think that on a small level of what we can do with friends and family is that kind of being curious to see a perspective that's different than what kind of I believe in or what I do. One thing that I've really appreciated about a lot of my friends is that we like to we're each religiously of a different background, but we kind of go to these different places. So I have a lot of kind of friends who are Christian, and I've enjoyed kind of going to their church and seeing how they operate and what's important to them in that. And for me, like I'm a Hindu, so kind of bringing people to the temple and seeing that, I think that exchange is really cool because you kind of get to learn about a lot of the similarities between these different religions and consequently the different traditions and different holidays that kind of get to be celebrated as a result of that. And then on the college level, I think it's really cool because of how everyone is kind of, especially like living in a dorm, you get exposure to a lot of different people who have different backgrounds and different religions and traditions. And I know that like I have one of my friends who is a Mormon and goes to church on Sundays, and there's a LDS church that's nearby. And so she often takes like some of us with her and stuff like that. And so it's cool to see how as kind of friendships are blossoming, being able to be curious and go to these different faith centers and learn about different traditions. It's been really impactful.
Funnily enough, when I was younger, I went to a charter school that was all about worldwide languages. So they wanted to teach the 4 most popular languages in the world. And the one that I learned about was Arabic. And so I studied Arabic for 4, maybe 5 years in this school. And we would put on this Ramadan festival every year as part of the Arabic program. But my teacher, who was from Jordan, he was the only one that was Muslim. And he was the only one who actually understood anything that we were doing. And so we were trying our best. I'm sure it was terrible, but we were trying our best to understand. So I guess my question here, and maybe this is directly to Irshad, but I would love to hear everybody else's perspectives. Like, what is the line between learning about somebody else's faith and then like maybe accidentally appropriating their traditions and their faith?
No, I think that's a good question. It's a tricky line, but I feel like from what I've seen from like my mosque and community, everyone's been very like, there hasn't been that many instances where we kind of cross the line. I think it's as open. There's people that have participated in fasts with us that are not of the religion. So I think we're in especially in terms of Ramadan, very open to whatever people want to experience. So I would say but again, that's like my perspective, my background, but I would be curious to see what everyone else would say.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, I obviously can't speak on your faith, Irshad, but what I can say is that from my perspective, with anything, even speaking as, an African American, a Black person, right? I have someone white come to the family function or come in a primarily Black situation, right? I think it's just all about understanding that like you are a guest and being not in that you should walk on eggshells, but, just being understanding like, hey, you don't know, like I don't try to guess certain things, right? Like just ask, be curious, be genuine. And to your point, I think more often than not, people are very happy to share their traditions and their culture. And I think if you're being, if you're having some, if you're reading the room, right, you do your own research, you make sure you don't put all that work on them as well. And you come in that sense, then I think it'd be very difficult to like do something truly offensive, at least from my perspective.
I absolutely agree. I feel like intention is like the big portion here of like when people take initiative and I think it can be really obvious when it's like genuine and earnest. I think that's the key indicator. I think my family had a Diwali party a while back. And I know we invited a lot of people a lot of white people or a lot of people who were just non-Indian. And I think one of the things is like a lot of them asked about like clothing, like whether like where they could find Indian clothes or what kind of Indian clothes to wear and stuff like that. And I felt like a lot of, in them asking and being curious and the way they were approaching it was wanting to be a part of that. I think that it was very obviously done in a very genuine way. And so I feel like when people try to approach it respectfully, that's when I think it's important and it doesn't really cross the line because then you're more willing to kind of help them and it's a more positive environment rather than kind of what you were saying earlier about like assuming and being more, I guess not taking that earnest approach.
So it's more about intention and curiosity. That's kind of what I'm gathering from everyone else's points and not us making these assumptions. I like what you said, Andre, about like making sure you're a guest. Don't walk on eggshells, but like know that this isn't necessarily your community and you can become a part of it, but there there's a transition there. It's something I see a lot. My mom is from Guatemala. And so it's always funny to gather with her side of the family because they all speak Spanish and they're all loud, talkative, funny Latinas. She's got 7 sisters. So it's just like, it's always big and fun and crazy. And every now and again, someone will get a new in-law and they're usually like very wide-eyed and scared. There's some gringo like walking to the party, not quite understanding what's going on. But I do think it's important to just be like, okay, you are welcome here. You are welcome here and you can be part of this, but you're not part of it just automatically. That there are things you need to learn. There are processes that need to be put in place.
I think that I feel like I have pretty limited experiences, but something that I can think of is I went to a wedding a little while back in Columbus, Ohio, actually, and it was, I think, the first Indian wedding that I had been to, where the groom was white, and but the whole wedding was a very Indian wedding. So all of the festivities, all the religious kind of things that were being done, the clothing, everything was done like in a very Indian way. And I felt like it was kind of unique seeing the blend of kind of his side of the family versus, I guess, our side of the family, which in terms of like the size and just how many people and all those kinds of differences. But I think it was like, so for I guess from my experience, this was probably like the first time I saw kind of a new group of people being in a different space almost. And it was unique. And it was very nice because it was kind of cool to see that I could tell, I think the groom was at times a little confused or a little uncomfortable at things, but he was very like high spirited in it and he really kind of took it as his own. So I think that was a very nice exchange.
I guess an example that I would have is I have a friend who I met him back in middle school, and we were pretty close all throughout high school and then into the college years. And he is Vietnamese. His mother and father are from Vietnam, and when I would go over there, they were always cooking traditional Vietnamese food. And I've been there for certain like family gatherings and things like that throughout the years. And I had a couple interesting experiences. I remember I went to dinner with them at this one kind of hole in the wall, and it's the whole clientele was Vietnamese, I assume. And like, I was there and I was like using the chopsticks, kind of like very analytically, like I could use them just enough, but his dad was looking at me. He was like, he said something to the waiter. That man brought me a fork. I was like, I was a little embarrassed, but they always, for me, I just would always make sure that, obviously there's stuff I could be told, like take your shoes off coming in the house, right? But then, other things I, try to make sure I sit there and have a conversation with his parents. It's a little intimidating at times because, they're speaking Vietnamese around the house, and they're kind of going about their own business and everything and kind of stay out the way. But I just want to make sure I'm being open with them. I'm talking with them. I'm like, how are y'all doing? Whatever. And through that, I've learned a few things, and even they've talked to me little comments about just like the show they're watching and stuff. And like, I think in just bridging that gap and like having that courage and still maintaining like a certain level of respect, I was able to learn a little bit more about them, and then just deepen our bond and my bond with my friend as well.
For me, so when I was in elementary school, my parents used to do like English lessons at a church nearby. And as kids, there was a babysitting done by volunteers or like husband, and they're really young, but they were married. And it was so much fun. Like, I think at first, like, because I was like, I've never been in a church before, but it was nice to kind of see. And they were so nice and welcoming in the facility. So they're like, I mean, they're like great mentors to have. And so, yeah, I think at the beginning it was a bit awkward. It was a bit like like Stuart was saying, it's a process. It takes time. So that was there. But I think after a year, like the teachers and like my family and the babysitters that we had, we all became so cohesive that it's like, it was nice when it all melted together. So I really like that.
I think it's really rewarding. I love that feeling when you feel like you're part of a culture that you weren't just born into and you're like, this is nice. Like, I feel like I'm kind of at home here with these people, as opposed to like that, what you were saying before, Irshad, about it's kind of a little awkward at first, the trepidation. You're kind of walking in slowly. I dated a girl for a long time from India. And so interacting with all of her family, and she also did traditional Indian dance. So I went to some of her performances, and everybody else there is Indian. I'm the only non-Indian person in the whole room. And everyone else is like kicking off their shoes like it's normal. And I'm like unlacing my boots, and it's taking me 10 full minutes. And it was great because I just like, they were so willing to let me learn about it. Nobody was like giving me the side eye or like, who's this guy? How did he come in here? And I loved that experience. Before we kind of end this round, I wanted to ask you guys one of the questions here as kind of our finisher before we go to round 3. And the question is, what experiences have you had sharing your own traditions with other people? Because we talked a little bit about other people showing you their traditions and their culture. What experiences have you had sharing yours?
Yeah, I guess for me, it would be the example I used earlier. You know, I've had friends over for family events and over at the house, and, you know, we got a certain way of doing things. You know, my mom, for example, she's really big on party games, board games, things like that. And, you know, people get those drinks on them, they get rowdy, and it's like, but it's all good and good fun. You know, people get that energy and they're like, man, he cheating, you know, whatever. Right. And like you know, music will come on, or like even these older songs, like the cookout songs. Right. And people, they hit the line dances, like they're doing the different dances. And then you're sitting there walking them through the steps. And like, you know, maybe they haven't heard certain music or even had certain food before, or had, you know, mac and cheese prepared a certain way or whatever it might be. So, you know, I've had that experience a couple times, and it's great. You know, again, you know, people are generally really welcoming. My family's no exception. I think those people had a good time. And I think that, you know, as they continued to come around, they got more comfortable, and they were able to sort of form their own relationship outside of myself with like other people in my family. So that's really nice to see. And, you know, it just, I think I could see like just seeing that person come out of their shell, and like seeing them like get more curious as they sort of get deeper into it and gain more acceptance is a great feeling.
My experience would be, I think mine's a bit more negative, and I kind of mentioned this before about like sharing it and then just kind of being glossed over or like undermined. I feel like that was a big theme when I was in high school. I think when I got to college, it got a little better. People were a bit more willing to listen, but there was still that stigma, this like, oh, we don't understand, so we're not going to take the effort to understand. So just being glossed over has been my experience, sadly.
I feel like what you were saying earlier about dance, that was kind of something I grew up doing an Indian style of dance, Bharatanatyam, so for quite a while. And I think one of the exchanges that I had in my life was kind of having a lot of my friends show up for these dance performances. And it was obviously like, it was a very predominantly kind of Indian area. And so in these performances, I think a lot of the times it was kind of maybe hard to understand from an outside perspective of what was going on, or they would speak a lot of like in English, but then they would also speak in different languages, and what people were wearing was very different. And I think I really appreciated that a lot of my friends would still kind of show up to this, and they would support me even if they didn't really fully understand what was going on. And it was kind of cool to see that. And a lot of these performances too would be kind of a long time, like maybe 3 hours, because there was so many groups of kids kind of performing. And so it meant a lot that like they would sit through all of that, and they would ask questions about it afterwards, and they would always kind of be excited for the next performance. And so I felt like that was one of those exchanges where my friends kind of got to see more of my culture.
I think that's really cool. The 3 hours might be hard, but I love sharing. Dance is a big one. I think is really easy to share with people across the board because all cultures have their own understanding and their own love for dance. We Latter-day Saints are bad at dancing, but we still do it a lot. One of the experiences that I've had both the kind of having your beliefs brushed aside and the having your friends really kind of embrace and enjoy learning about your beliefs. So it's been cool to kind of have both. One of the experiences that I really cherished was I had a friend of mine who came to church with me on Easter one year. Not Christian, not even really a theist, just like they wanted to be with me. And so they came to church and they were very specific about the questions they asked. They wanted to know like exactly like how long of a dress to wear and like what patterns were okay. Like, well, we're going into a pretty conservative Christian denomination. Like, what can I have different colored hair? Like, what am I looking at here? And it was a cool thing because I could tell by their questions that they were a little bit nervous, but that they were willing to do it. And by the end of the day, I think everyone had a good time, even if it was just a little strange. And that's kind of the key that I've learned for the most part with learning about other traditions, other religions. It's okay to be a little bit uncomfortable and you just kind of roll with it and you be respectful. And eventually that discomfort kind of fades away and it just becomes another normal part of your life. So we're going to move into round 3, the reflecting on the conversation round. And we're each going to get 2 minutes to answer one of the following questions. What was the most meaningful / valuable thing to you in this conversation? What learning, new understanding, or common ground was found on the topic? How has this conversation changed your perception of anyone in this group? Is there a next step you would like to take based upon the conversation? So I can go first and we'll go back into that order as before. Question I want to answer here. What was most meaningful / valuable to you in this conversation? I just like hearing about how common the values in most major religions are. I always find that so interesting. I took a comparative religion class in high school, and the major theme I came out from that was like, oh, there really isn't that much difference. And we all talked about it at the very beginning and throughout the course of this conversation. That's like, holidays are about family. It's about your friends, about people that you care about. And everybody is welcome if they come with the right intention. And we will help them become part of this. And I don't know. It's always touching to me when you think about how much the Venn diagram actually overlaps in humanity, because we only ever focus on the parts that are on the outside.
No, I definitely agree. Going off the second question, what learning, new understanding, or common ground was found on the topic? That's so I was thinking in a similar vein where everything that everyone said for the differences in our upbringing and our traditions, it all centered back to we want to be with our loved ones. You know, we want to celebrate that time together, eat some good food, and maybe get off work, right? Like, I feel like we all more or less want the same thing. And just hearing about like how Irshad, for example, was saying this experience that you have as a kid, because yeah, you know, if a major part of what I believed was, you know, what was important and what mattered, and like to my family and my traditions was not even mentioned, you know, didn't even get like, yeah, that would make me feel some type of way, and that would affect, you know, sort of how I view myself and my role like in this society. So I definitely gained some new understanding, and I'm glad to see that we all kind of focused on the same stuff in terms of the holidays. And I feel like, listen, any one of y'all's performances, family parties, like invite me, you know, I'll I'll come through for sure. So I thought it was really productive, and I'm glad that, you know, we're all on the same page in that way.
I'd say for me, I think it's what Stuart said before was there's an initial period of discomfort, but then it becomes like a normal part of your life. And I think that's like, it just applies to life in general. Cause I feel like we don't do things because we're afraid it's uncomfortable, but that's the point. Like you're not going to get anywhere if you don't want to sit in discomfort and get better. So I think that's just a good life lesson to take in the future.
I think I was on the same wavelength as Irshad. I was thinking about the last question about the next steps I'd like to take kind of based on this conversation. And I was thinking about kind of after like hearing about what everyone's perspective is kind of about joining these spaces that are not familiar to you, it makes me kind of want to go out and be in those kind of uncomfortable situations of joining someone else's family traditions or seeing someone else's culture. Because I think at times, especially in the beginning, it could feel a little bit uncomfortable. And just because you feel really out of place. But I think what Irshad was saying about kind of sticking through it and really how much you can kind of gain from that experience, it makes me want to kind of put myself out there and have more of those kind of experiences.
So it sounds like we're all going to join Irshad for Ramadan. And then we're going to all go to Andre's house for Christmas, maybe get a little drunk, play some games, and then we'll go watch your dance recitals and maybe watch all of The Sound of Music. It's going to be busy. I got to buy some plane tickets because we live all the way across the country. I really do appreciate you guys joining me today. I honestly think, and I think about this basically every day whenever I interact with anybody, whenever you have a negative interaction with somebody, you think about it a lot. But when you have positive ones, you don't necessarily dwell on it as much because we take for granted the positivity and the niceness of lots of people. If someone waves at you or smiles at you on the street, you just think, okay, you're like, all right. But if someone's really rude to you, then you think about that, you dwell on it, you think about what it means for you and what it means for the world. I like taking the opportunity to just recognize how similar we all are and how much every major religion, every major culture that I've ever heard of, it's all centered around building community, protecting those that you love, and trying to do better for the people who are in need. And I love that. To our audience at home, if you enjoyed this conversation, the beautiful thing about Living Room Conversations is that you can have your very own version of this exact conversation. You go to livingroomconversations.org and you download the Holidays and Traditions Guide, and you'll have all the same questions, all the same rules. You can set timers. You can, go outside kind of the conversation agreements that we have, depending on your community and who you're with. But just know that these conversations can be had by you with strangers, with friends, with family. And all it takes is for you to go to our website and to download a guide. So we appreciate you for listening. You can download all the guides and you can donate at our website. You can join our Patreon. There's not much on there, but you can join it. And if you want to learn more about what we do and what events we have coming up, you can follow us on Instagram and X at Living Room Convo. You can find us at Living Room Conversations on Facebook and YouTube and any other platform. So I thank the guests and I thank the listeners. Have a good rest of your day.